right, Jacob, welcome to the ranch, man. Thanks for coming out.
Hello, Del Stark. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great having you. So, for the audience, Jacob has quite the background that we're going to get into. First off, former hog driver, so we knew each other back in the day. But what separated him from most of his peers is that about midway through his career, he separated from the Air Force and decided to set out to set a world record in open ocean rowing. So, launched from Washington State and rowed himself, so solo, unsupported, and continuously 7,000 miles and about 11 months to Australia. So solo, obviously meaning by yourself, continuous, meaning no stops, so no layovers in Hawaii on the way, right? And then unsupported, meaning no resupply. So he's not getting any additional support once he launched. So we're going to get into that adventure, talk about his time in the A-10, and just kind of figure out what motivates somebody to be able to accomplish this, world record-setting goal. So anyhow, so we'll get into it. And the first question I have for you is, what on earth motivates somebody to set such a grandiose goal? Like, when did that first enter your mind?
Well, it first started whenever I was in a non-flying job. My first assignment was at my first Korea assignment, which is where I met you. I ended up getting an ALO assignment out in California, Air Liaison Officer at Fort Irwin. So it's just training a bunch of Army guys, non-flying. So while I was there, I just kind of got bored, and I just felt like I was still missing something in life. So like a lot of my life growing up and early adulthood, I just kind of felt like I'd never really fit into places. Like I never really felt like I fit into the fighter pilot community very well. I never felt like I was really part of any group or anything that made sense. Like it's just something was still missing. And so I just wanted to go out and explore something that I had no idea about. So learn a completely new skill set and then try to challenge myself physically and mentally. And so I just started researching while I was at Fort Irwin. And eventually I came across ocean rowing, and it's a fairly small sport. So the records are pretty sparse. So it was one area where I thought, maybe if this is an area where there's some records that could be filled, it might be a fun adventure. And I've never really owned a boat before, so it would be a new learning experience that way. And so I ended up on ocean rowing. And then once I started plotting out all the different routes that had been done before. And one that I saw that wasn't complete was from North America to Australia, solo and nonstop. Now, in 1982, there was a guy called Peter Bird, and he's the official guy, first guy to make it across the Pacific Ocean from North America to Australia. But I believe he had to get a resupply or a stop, and then he ended up having to get rescued offshore. So it wasn't quite complete, but he is officially the first guy to do it. And I just wanted to do it a little bit longer and harder, and make landfall of my own accord without getting any help from anybody. So it's a different kind of record. So that's kind of how I started thinking about it. Now, why I wanted to do something like that is a little bit different. It's, it just called to me, like, that just made sense because, like, I had done a lot of, flying stuff. So I was in the air. Right before this, I had rode my bicycle across the United States. And so I got to see a lot of ground stuff. So it's like, let's just do some sea stuff. And so that's what kind of led me in that direction.
Have you always had that call to adventure?
I think so, yeah. I love getting out there and experiencing new things, just being outdoors and, like right here at your place, it's just amazing. And we just got back from the ocean surfing, which it's always awesome just to get out and enjoy nature, and to do it for 11 months straight. It was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's just like, for the average person, it's hard to wrap your mind around like what it would be like to be by yourself that long.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible.
You get used to it.
Just adapt to your new environment.
Yeah, you basically have to. There was a point where, like, first few weeks are the worst because, like, that's your body getting used to all the new movement in the ocean. It's like the seasickness. It's the, you're orienting to your new life, and it can be disorienting at times. So I got to the point where like I wasn't making the progress at the very beginning that I wanted to, and I was getting very behind schedule. And so there was a point where it's like, all right, you either have to accept this and move on. And once I accepted that, this is my life, that everything around me is where I live, all the wildlife are my neighbors. So accept it and move on with your life and stop thinking about what if.
Yeah.
And just keep moving one day at a time.
It kind of just like pulls you into that moment, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, you have to. Like at times when it gets hard, it's just, what is the next thing? And then just do that. What is the next thing? Do that. And once you're in that mindset, then things get a lot easier.
Yeah. So backing up just a little bit, just to give the audience an idea of like what makes you tick, because it's not your everyday person who goes on to achieve the goal of becoming an A-10 pilot, does that for a period of time, and then feels the call to do something even bigger than that. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Houston, Texas, for the most part. That was my early childhood. I was born there, and I was there all the way through, I don't know, 4th, 5th grade, somewhere around there. And actually, yeah, I spent 6th grade year in Lubbock, Texas. That's where I lived with my grandparents for a year there. And then I ended up moving back to Texas for high school. So that's where I grew up. Yeah.
Yeah. What
or to Houston for high school. Sorry.
Was it like, what was your childhood like? Like play sports?
Yeah. I was in sport, like, just standard little league baseball. I did soccer growing up. And then by the time I got in middle school, I played football. And then freshman year of high school, I played football and ran track. And then what else did I do? And eventually I quit football and just focused on running. I went into cross country, actually. Cross country and track is what I focused on. And then I was in band too. So I was playing the saxophone at the time. And then I also was doing Boy Scouts, Eagle Scout. That was the outdoor part of it for me, where I got, fell in love with going out and adventuring in nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was home life?
Home life, I mean, just overall, the childhood, I can't complain too much because I always had food, and so we weren't really too terribly like poor or anything like that. But it did get a little bit rough when my parents got a divorce, and so it was a little bit tumultuous for a while. I ended up living in a foster home for a little bit. Then my aunt took me out of the foster home. I lived with her and my cousin and my uncle there for a while, and then eventually I ended up with my grandparents. And after all the dust settled from all the lawyers and legal fees and divorce and all that, I ended up in back with my dad for high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just ask, not to like dig too deep.
No, I hear you.
But anyone who's been involved with like these ultra endurance sports,
Yeah.
and I would say rowing for the absolute world record is the pinnacle of an endurance sport and an endurance event. I mean, it makes like 100-mile run look like a weekend, just something you might do for fun compared to an 11-month row. But if you're involved in endurance sports, you realize that the people at the elite level, a lot of times it's an easy way to like just like, I don't want to say bury the pain, but like, it's like if you have your demons, you can exercise them by crushing yourself on a mountain bike, on a road bike, doing triathlon. And so I've seen like a lot of people that rise to the elite level have gone through sometimes some really hard stuff at a young age,
Yeah, it definitely affected me for sure. And yeah, you're right. Like it does affect you, but yeah, I lost my train of thought there.
It's all good. It just like it shapes who you are, these challenges that you face and then you overcome, and it just builds a resiliency that allows you to, I think, accomplish some of these goals,
Yeah, I don't know if all of that, like, I don't know how much of that like kind of motivated me, but I think part of the not fitting in places was due to kind of being pushed out and by myself in the foster community. I think that affected me quite a bit. And I'm not sure if I've worked through all of it, but part of the trip was I also wanted to focus on, personal development and meditation and disciplining my mind so that I could, just kind of sort through what some of those issues are that I hadn't worked through yet. And I'm still working through some of them, but
Sure.
once you're out there doing one thing at a time, sometimes, focusing on just how to clear your mind and do mental health stuff kind of falls by the wayside. So whenever I had opportunities to actually be relaxed and present, then I would take full advantage of doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you first think about becoming a pilot? Like, when did that enter your consciousness?
Yeah, that's when I was in high school. When I was in high school, I went to an air show, saw fighter jets flying around. I was like, I just wanted to get out of my hometown and be on my own somewhere. And I saw the Air Force Academy as a good way to do that, like without having to spend money. So I saw jets. I was like, cool. How can I get there? Air Force Academy seems like a good way to go. So I just went that way.
Any like military or aviation background in your family, or was it completely out of the blue?
Yeah, it's pretty much out of the blue. My grandpa served in the Korean War for 4 years. He was a radio operator out there. But other than that, my dad didn't serve. Yeah, really.
Would they think of that? Would they think it was cool and a good goal? Or
Yeah, they were happy with it. They don't have to, help me pay for college. So, well, if they would have anyway. But
yeah.
But they ended up my dad ended up helping a little bit when I ended up leaving the Air Force Academy of my own accord and I went to Embry-Riddle in Daytona, where I commissioned from.
Okay. So, it's not, dude, it is so hard to get into the Air Force Academy. Like, that is a feat in and of itself. And so the fact that you were able to do that, I think, said something about your intelligence and your ability to, find a goal and stick to it and get it done. Mm-hmm. I think that suggests something about your character all the way back then. Because, how did you even go about getting like your congressman's endorsement and all that stuff?
That was the hardest part. I guess you could get the senators too if you knew one of those dudes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just looked up my local congressman, made an appointment, went to his office and asked him. And he signed it off. And
like good grades and stuff?
Yeah, they interview questions like, I can barely remember now what he asked me, but
like, were you a good student?
Oh yeah, I was pretty good. I think I was, I was in the top 10%. I don't think I was anywhere like special, but good enough to get into the Air Force Academy.
Nice.
Yeah, like I know the first podcast that you had, he wanted to go to the Air Force Academy too, but he had problems with his SAT scores. That was a little bit of my problem too, so that's why I ended up at the preparatory school for a year.
Okay.
And they make you take the SAT 3 times and ACT 3 times while you're there.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, to try to get your grades up so you can get accepted.
Nice.
Into the academy the next year. But if you graduate from the prep school, you're most likely going to get into the academy.
And so you did that a couple years and you decided, hey, this isn't...
Something's still missing.
This isn't what I thought.
Something's still missing. That's a thing that's been driving my life, really. Something's still missing. And the problem is nothing is missing because the only thing, you're not going to find anything out there. You're not going to find inner peace by looking outwardly. So you have to... figure out what's going on in here before you can find peace anywhere in the world, because wherever you go, there you are,
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be tough, man. Like the Air Force Academy is a difficult environment. Like when people get out of there, I sense sometimes a little bit of bitterness. They're so happy to be done with it. And then maybe like 5-10 years later, they're like, that was actually good for me. That wasn't so bad.
It wasn't so bad. Yeah. So it's crazy. Like I had to do 3 different basic trainings. So the prep school has their own little one. The Air Force Academy has their basic training. And then the ROTC has their own different basic training. So I had to go to 3 different ones. It's ridiculous.
Just a glutton for punishment by your last basic training.
Yeah. But yeah, it worked out fine. And I made it through the whole freshman year. Cause freshman year, you're like, walking on the side, greeting everybody and you're getting hazed a little bit, but I made it through that phase, and like where after you make it through freshman year, then you can walk normally and be a regular person again. So once I made it through all that, then I wanted to finish the whole year so I could get credits and take those credits and apply them to the next university. But yeah, it was an interesting experience for sure. But I definitely learned a lot. But I knew what the future would be there. And I was like, I just want to experience other stuff. Like I wanted to experience more normal college life kind of stuff. And that's what I went and did.
And then, so you went transferred from the Air Force Academy to Embry-Riddle in Daytona Beach, and then commissioned out of there.
Correct.
Okay.
Now I teach for them.
Oh, that's cool.
Online. Yeah.
Full circle.
Yeah.
So how was pilot training?
Pilot training was good. I was lucky. I got to go to Whiting Field. So
nice.
Yeah, I did the Navy pilot training. Yeah, it was good in Pensacola, flying the T-34. It was back when the T-37 was still around, before they transitioned to T-6s. And did you fly the T-6?
I flew the T-34 also at Whiting Field.
Oh, you did Whiting Field too. Okay, cool. Yeah, but then the T-6s started coming around. But either way, that was a fun experience to start flying the turbojets and stuff like that, or the props. And then eventually I got to 38s and went to Enid at Vance Air Force Base in Oklahoma. And 38 training was fun. And then eventually got selected for A-10, which was pretty awesome. And then, of course, you got to go through that whole IFF thing before you get to the jet.
So you described T-38 training as fun. So did you do pretty well in that program?
I mean, I did well enough, I guess. And I got an A-10, so you can't complain about that. I mean, of course, not all of it was fun. Like, especially going from Navy to the Air Force, because it's such a different kind of environment. The Navy is just a lot more chill, and so you go from like a super relaxed environment in the T-34 with the Navies, and then you go to the T-38 where like every morning you're there at 6 a.m. like doing those, what do they call them? Like the little stand-ups where you have to do the random emergency procedure of the day and explain it in front of everybody how you would react in this circumstance. But so some of it wasn't fun and it was a lot of work, but otherwise, it was...
Your performance was good enough.
But you're flying a T-38, which is pretty crazy in itself. Like, that jet is pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that transition from T-34 to T-38 was just pure pain. Like, it wasn't so hard.
Yeah. It wasn't fun at first, but, once you get used to it, it's just like anything else,
Yeah, and so you pick up an A-10, and then you head out to Davis Monthan, go through the B course. And then what was your first hog assignment?
The first hog was at Spangdahlem in Germany.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I got lucky with that. So I spent about 2.5 to 3 years there, and it was amazing. So like living in Germany, so you're like Central Europe, so it was like a 4-hour drive to Paris and like 7-hour drive to the Alps if you want to go skiing, 4-hour drive to Amsterdam, and easy Ryanair flight over to Sweden or wherever you want to go. And so it was an amazing travel opportunity. And of course, it was cool to fly in Europe too, because I got to do a lot of cool flying there, like with deployments or TDY trips to like Portugal or England, and, doing those different quick trips. I even got to do an air show where I flew a 2-ship out to Rome, so you see, it's just a really fun assignment. And, learning about the culture there too was a cool part of it. And then after Spangdahlem, I ended up in Korea for 2 years. So I did a 2-year assignment there the first time. And then after that is when I ended up in California with the Army dudes.
Oh, nice. Mm-hmm. Did you deploy out of Spang? Because I feel like we may have crossed paths at Bagram around that time.
Yeah, I did. I got deployed summer 2006 was my first deployment in the Hog.
Okay, so I think, your unit ripped the Alaska unit out.
Yeah,
so you guys replaced us.
Yeah.
How was that deployment?
It was good. I mean, it's my first combat experience. So like it was, eye-opening to figure out what a combat zone is and how life works over there. But it was a really great opportunity or learning experience for me. And of course, it's the first time you're flying a combat machine that is designed for death and destruction in combat. So it's, it can get intense at times, but luckily for the pilot guys, we're not exactly going outside of the wire very much, driving around on land outside of base. But Of course, get the random mortar attacks and rocket attacks and, that kind of stuff. But it was nothing too scary. We didn't have any overruns or anything like that on base. So it was, it was pretty good.
Did you go to any ticks or employ troops in contact or employ weapons on that trip?
I did, yeah. And that was the first time I shot the gun, the 30 millimeter Gatling gun. The troops in contacts can be intense, man. Like the very first one was, the classic where, over the radio, troops in contact over here. And then you finally get on the JTAC Freak and all you hear is machine gun fire in the background and they're screaming and they can, barely hear each other. And we show up and this first guy comes, throws down a couple Willie Pete rockets. And then I came in and just opened up with a gun and, the firing stopped after that. So
that's the best feeling when the guns go quiet, the dust settles, and the guys are okay.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody got killed on that. So, and whenever they made it back to base, you could see one of their vehicles, bullet holes all over the place, and it's just they were in an intense situation.
Yeah, that's when you too. I remember the first time going to troops in contacts, and that's when you realize how good the training is. Because even under the stress of the real life scenario, you pretty quickly snap out of it and you remember exactly what you've rehearsed countless times.
Yeah, you have to, you get into such a concentration, just pure concentration, especially when you're dealing with troops in contact. So it turned out on that employment, I was within 45 meters of friendlies.
So danger close.
Very danger close, yeah. So that was pretty intense, but
wow.
Yeah. So there was several more, troops in contacts, a couple weapon caches that were blowing up, stuff like that. And, I think maybe half a dozen times I employed the first trip. Yeah.
Did you start feeling at this time that you weren't, that career field wasn't resonating with you like you thought?
I wasn't at that place yet where I was ready to leave. I still wanted to see what the career how it would play out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, so come back home, finish up in Germany, and then go to Korea from there.
Yeah. Spent 2 years in Korea, and that was another culture shock. It was cool though, learning about, Korean culture and the DMZ, of course, flying in that area, P518 prohibited area. Yeah. It's pretty cool flying there, especially at night. And do you remember flying there at night?
Yeah, I remember almost dying there at night many times.
Getting lit up by SA2s.
Which is so congested.
It is congested, yeah, until you get to P518.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. But yeah, it was crazy because especially at night in that area, because South Korea, it's lit up like any other country, but North Korea, there's just a line in the ground and then the lights stop. And it's pretty intense. And then what's even weirder is when your radar warning receiver starts getting signals from the north, and they're watching you over there.
Yeah. You're the joys of communism, no electricity. Didn't look very fun over there.
Yeah. I guess those radar guys are on generators.
Yeah. They save some energy for them. Yeah, that's cool. Get any adventures in the region while you're out there?
What I would do is I would just go to national parks and camp and hike is really what I do in my free time out there. I probably went to 15 different national parks. They have a bunch of them. A lot of them are real nice.
Yeah.
I would just go out camping, do a mountain hike, and then, hang out in nature and then come back.
Korea is so beautiful and so mountainous, and you don't I never thought of Korea as being so mountainous until I was there.
There's a lot of different landscape. Like in the north, it's, a lot of mountains, and but in the south, you got Busan Beach Town.
And the beaches, yeah. It's a real cool country.
Yeah. And then, the terrain is cool too. Did you do a lot of low levels down in the south part of the peninsula?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of cool terrain down there too.
Nice. And then where'd you go after Korea?
After Korea, I went to, that was the ALO assignment at Fort Irwin. And and while I was there, I got lucky. They needed MC-12 pilots. So I got selected to go to an MC-12 deployment. And so it ended up being about 9 months of my 3-year assignment there. So I got to fly for almost a year of my 3-year non-flying job. And it worked out well because I was flying the King Air 350, which is, of course, a very popular civilian plane. And I was able to use those qualifications once I got out to do civilian flying. So that worked out.
So, yeah, air liaison officer. What a lot of people don't realize is that as a fighter pilot, you have to go do other things than just fly.
Yeah.
And the further along you get in your career, you realize that you had the most fun probably at the beginning of your career. And then all those additional responsibilities, those they call them like alpha assignments, and all that stuff starts to make you realize what this career is actually like over time. And it's not the same as being a lieutenant in your first fighter squadron.
Definitely not. Yeah, the higher ranking you get, the less you fly, and the more paperwork you do.
Yeah, that's kind of the nature of the beast. Was it here where you started thinking about some of these bigger adventures?
Yeah, Fort Irwin. Yeah, that's when I started thinking about it. And so I contacted the naval architect while I was in Fort Irwin and started asking him questions about it. And we went back and forth while I was at Korea for that last assignment. And then once I finally separated and got out, well, first I did a bunch of traveling, which we can talk about. And then after that, I got my ATP completed. Let's see. Oh yeah, and I wanted to make one last. I wanted to meet the naval architect before paying him the money. So he lived in St. Augustine in Florida at the time. So I went down to St. Augustine, met him. He showed me his plans, and I was like, all right, signed the contract, gave him the payment, and then it was off to the races.
How much does a design like that cost?
It's crazy. $25K.
$25K for the plan.
For the plans, yeah. That's before any construction starts at all.
And this guy, was he like? How did you determine that he was capable to design you a boat for this type of adventure?
Well, I checked out all his previous work, and he had a pretty extensive website showing all the designs that he had done, and how they had worked and the success of those vessels that he created. And just looked at his resume, talked to him, seemed like a good guy. And he was actually approaching retirement. And his only boat that he hadn't designed yet that he wanted to was an ocean rowing boat. So it kind of worked out nicely for him and I. And it was pretty cool because he ended up doing, after he finished this design, he retired, sold his house. He bought a sailboat that he had designed. Like, it was one of his first original sailboat designs. Him and his wife bought that boat back, and then they sailed around the world with it. And they happened to be in their sailboat as I was approaching Hawaii. So they landed in actually, as I was approaching Australia. So they landed in Australia about a couple weeks before I did. So, or maybe, yeah, somewhere around a couple weeks. And so they just hung out in Australia until I got there, and they saw me make landfall. So that was a cool experience.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and also the owner of the Schooner Creek Boat Works is where my boat was built. Like, the owner and his wife also flew out and saw the landing. So that was pretty neat.
That's incredible, man. So what did the design look like? Did he go to you and say, okay, what are your requirements? Or did you work through those requirements together?
No, yeah, I had to explain what my requirements were. What do I want to use the boat for? And I started off with, up to a year of food, but as small as possible. And
it's like two contrasting requirements.
And then the big one was it's capable of self-righting. So if it gets knocked upside down, it'll pop right back up. And from there, we went through about 10 different iterations. So, there's a schematic for every system in the boat. So electrical schematic, you got one for plumbing, all the different systems. And then the big one was the actual, like, the physical layout, the structure of the boat, and the size. And we went through the different iterations. A lot of discussion took place with the hard top. I wanted to have some protection over me from the elements. And it's a weird thing in the ocean rowing community where they say that you can't have a canvas top because it'll be like, it could be used as a sail or something, is what they say. So I opted to install a hard top. So it was the only ocean rowing boat that had ever included something like that. And it also allowed me to put 2 more solar panels on top, which worked out really well. So yeah, we went through a bunch of different iterations, and finally, once we were good with it, he stayed on board throughout the higher design or the build process. So if the builders had a question about the designs, or they needed to, make an alteration to the design, or I wanted to make an alteration to the design, then he could approve it so that everybody's happy. So the builder knows that the naval architect is on board, and then they're doing what I want them to do. So that was a fun part of the process, because I got to be at Schooner Creek Boat Works while they were building it and actually help them build it. And it was really nice of them to let me do that, because I know there's probably some liability issues with me working in the shop. But yeah, it was really cool to learn, the boat building process. And that was part of it at the beginning. It's a whole new skill set that I can learn and, improve, my baseline knowledge about what it means to be living here.
Yeah. What kind of materials did they use to build the boat?
It was primarily carbon fiber.
Carbon fiber, the best material ever, right?
Unless you're in a submarine.
Yeah, that's okay. And then what did the electronic systems look like? So you said solar panels, I presume like battery packs?
Yeah, so I had almost 600 watts of power at peak efficiency for the sun. Yeah, so it's 3 deep cycle marine batteries. So the systems I had a chart plotter. So the autopilot is basically just a motor that controls the angle of the rudder with a push-pull cable. So I included that in there. And then it was just the other things like lighting. The water maker, had to power the water maker, and other devices inside that I needed to charge and stuff like that. So it was a pretty extensive system to put together.
Like navigation, what was your navigation system?
Yeah, I had a GPS chart plotter. So it was a Garmin chart plotter. So it's a screen that big, and I had an AIS in it too, where I could kind of get signals from the other boats, automatic identification systems, like a transponder.
So they could see you could see them.
Correct,
kind of thing.
And you get ranging distances, and all that stuff. And yeah, so the navigation, I also had backups if I needed. I had a handheld GPSs. Well, mainly they're included with my Garmin InReach, which was like a texting device where you can text via satellite. And you can get positions off of that too. And then if all electrical failed, then I had a sextant that I could do celestial navigation with. And luckily I never had to break that out, but it was fun learning about it and, doing the different sites and stuff. And I did a couple practice runs out there just to make sure I could do it if I had to.
Could you do it?
Within reason.
Yeah.
Good enough to see Hawaii, I think.
You weren't like necessarily Sir Shackleton out there.
No, luckily I didn't crash into Alaska or not Alaska, Antarctica.
You didn't have to go that route.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like I presume there's a lot of redundancy built into this. Are you thinking about, okay, if this system fails, I'm going to use this as a backup. If that fails, I'm going to use this.
Yeah, I had backups for everything pretty much, and backup spare parts for everything. So like if you just even think about the water maker itself.
Yeah, tell me about the water maker.
The water maker is a reverse osmosis thing. Basically, it just takes the seawater and increases the pressure to about 700 psi and forces it through a membrane that has holes that are small enough to block the salt. And then you get fresh water on the other side. But it's a pretty power intensive piece of equipment. It's not that bad. I guess it's like 9 amps at when it's operating. But I had enough power on the boat where if it was sunny, I could run it and still get a positive amperage. So like I had plenty of power running the most power demanding system on the boat. But luckily I only had to run that thing once every 4 days or so, because I had a pretty decent size freshwater storage tank under there.
Any backup water systems?
Yeah. So if that failed, I had a handheld one that was about this size that you could pump water out of the ocean that way. And if that one failed, or if I ended up in a life raft, I had a tiny one that I could use just to survive in my go bag if needed. Dude,
what a disaster that would have been, get separated from the boat.
Oh yeah, getting separated, you're dead. But if you're in a life raft, that's another terrible day too. But at least you can maybe get out of that one. If you get separated from your boat, you're
Oh
toast.
yeah, game over.
Yeah, it's game over.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm kind of getting an idea of what like the structure of the boat looks like and the systems and that and the water. What was your food plan? Like, tell me about how that went down.
The food plan was interesting. Like that was one part of it that I knew I wanted to get help with, because I didn't want to miss. I wanted to make sure I got all my macronutrients, my micronutrients, everything to keep me balanced and healthy while I was out there, and getting the proper caloric intake. So I went to a lady called Ingrid Skoog. She works at Oregon State. They're the Beavers, right? Oregon
Yes.
State. Yeah, Oregon State. And so I went down to her campus and met with her and some of her students, and she kind of made it a class project for them to come up with this plan. They did consulted with physiologists and stuff there, and they did testing on my body to kind of see what kind of my baselines are and what my calorie intake should be, with just resting calorie intake. And then so they developed the whole plan, and it was basically a 7-day menu with a rotating meal schedule, 3 meals a day with snacks. And then it had drinks that add calories like Gatorade, stuff like that. And then oils and things to really get dense calories. But it was a 7-day menu, and some were cooking days, and some I didn't have to cook if I didn't want to. I had a lot of powdered food, which is, it gets old after a while, but it was something called Soylent. Have you heard of that? They sponsored me, and I got free Soylent, so that worked out well. But yeah, I can get bland. So what I ended up doing, she was worried about palatability, that I would get too tired of eating one thing and then that I wouldn't be able to eat it anymore. So like with that Soylent stuff, she gave me a whole variety of like different flavors I could put into it and stuff like that to change up the flavors. So it worked out well. I mean, it was 6,000 calories a day. Is that what I said? Yeah. It was 6,000 calories a day. And I managed my weight fairly well. I lost about 25 pounds, I'd say. But I lost some food while out there just due to water intrusion. And so when I was a little bit behind schedule. I was hoping to make it in 10 months. So I was about a month behind schedule. Towards the end, I was starting to ration a little bit. And I got to the point where I rationed a little bit too much and worked a little bit too hard with my body. And I started to feel like I was breaking down a little bit. So it's serious if you don't get enough calories, and like you're not gonna be able to do the work.
Yeah, they say even in triathlon and things like that, it's one aspect it's a race, and the other aspect is an eating competition.
Yeah.
Because if you can't keep the calories coming in, your body just cannot continue with the output.
Exactly. Yeah.
So 6,000 calories a day. Yeah. That's hard to get down until you're trained to do so.
And that's part of that I was saying at the very beginning, the 2-week period where you're adjusting. It's like trying to force yourself to get all this stuff in your body, and you're nauseous at the same time. So it's kind of disorienting and difficult to get through that first period. But once you're past it, then it's smooth sailing.
Nice. All right. So how did you prepare yourself like physically and mentally for this journey?
Yeah, well, I'll go to the mentally one first. So mentally, I didn't know how to prepare really. So how do you prepare for isolation? And the only thing that I could think of was to just do meditation. And so I just started practicing, and I downloaded some meditation programs. I did a couple while I was on shore, and I was starting to get the hang of it, but I also had programs to do while I was out there. So just in case I needed to get my mind somewhere different while I was, at sea, I had things that I could listen to that kind of help bring me back if I needed it. But luckily, I never really had any issues with isolation. It was, it's really easy for me, actually. Like, I never really had intense desires or sadness or anything like that. I've seen these videos of ocean rowers that are crossing the Atlantic, and like they're only 1 month into it and they're crying, asking about their family. And I'm like, okay. Yeah, so it's like, maybe I don't understand what the isolation is, because if it's that bad, So, but I did it. 11 months later, I was still fine. So, yeah. And some of my family, when they landed there, they thought I would be a scraggly, confused person that didn't know how to interact with people. But they were surprised that everything was fine, normal.
That like degree of mental toughness is hard to wrap your mind around.
I don't know if it's mental toughness or if it's just my disposition. It's just
you just accepted it.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, you have to, otherwise you'll drive yourself crazy.
You won't do it. Yeah. All right. So physically, because I would think it would be really easy to get like overuse injuries.
Exactly.
To, tear a rotator cuff there. I mean, there's so many things that could happen out there. So how did you prepare your body for this?
So yeah, overuse injuries was something I was concerned about. So the first thing I did was I hired personal trainer, and I just told him what I was doing. And he just gave me an exercise plan that is a lot of core stability kind of work and just general strength and conditioning. And then, of course, just getting on the rowing machine and just put in the hours. So I did a lot of that. But in terms of the repetitive use injuries, I had consulted with the sports medicine physiologist, or what was she, physical therapist for the rowing team at Washington State.
Nice.
University. I also consulted a doctor there too, a sports medicine doctor, to talk about all these issues. And I ended up taking, her name is Karen Calera, and I took her out on my boat. It was in Gig Harbor. And so I took her out on the boat and just showed her the mechanics. Like, all right, this is where the foot stretchers are going to be, how high my feet are going to be, how high the seat's going to be, because I had padding that I could raise and lower the height if I needed to a little bit. And then the placement of, I guess the overlocks were where they were, but either way, like, so where are my shoulders when I'm rowing? How are my elbows positioned? And I was like, can you just analyze, what I'm doing here? And if you see any warning signs that could lead to a repetitive use injury. And so I took her out there and she gave me some tips, and and then after that, I spent about 6 weeks at Gig Harbor in Puget Sound, up in Washington, and there's a place there called Arabella's Landing that let me stay there at their marina. And so I just went out every day while I was there, just put in the hours in the boat, and that was on Puget Sound, which is. It may have been a poor choice because the currents through there get crazy. Like, we're talking 10 knots in some places, and I can only row 2 to 3 knots. So I had to plan it with the tides for sure. So, but the funny thing is, like, you're in ocean water in the Sound, but you're not in the open ocean. So the last thing I did was when I was in Neah Bay. So that's where I left from, is a place called Neah Bay, the very northwestern point in Washington State. And I did one full lap into the ocean just to see what it was like, and then went back in, and then just kind of let my body relax. And I spent, a good 3-4 days with family. They started flying in, and then and then went from there. I don't know what other physical fitness stuff I did. I was worried about my back because flying jets and stuff so I went to a chiropractor. I was doing a chiropractor twice a week, and then I also went to a Rolfer. Have you heard of Rolfing?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's named after a lady called Ida Rolf. It's basically, they use fascia in your muscles to kind of help with skeletal alignment and stuff like that. And so I went to one of those ladies, and for a good 6 weeks. And so I was trying to pay attention to all the different things. But once you get out there, you can start to notice when you are approaching a repetitive use injury. If you start, it's like you start getting a hot spot for a blister, you immediately address it. Otherwise, it's going to get worse. So when you start feeling something funny in your elbow or your shoulder, it's like, okay, maybe I need to adjust this to kind of get back and make sure this doesn't get worse. So as long as you're paying attention and you correct places that are starting to feel weird, then you'll be all right.
So what kind of intensity did you need to row at to get your like 2 to 3 knots that you were shooting for? And then like how long were you planning on rowing per day?
I was planning for 12 hours a day for rowing, which is what I averaged at. And then with breaks in there.
Yeah.
What was that first?
The intensity.
Oh, the intensity.
Like when you're rowing, how hard are you pushing yourself?
Yeah, well, if you're going to be doing it all day, you got to make it an endurance thing. So you're not sprinting it by any means. So it's not too intense. I'm not breaking a sweat. So like it's just a steady movement all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get pretty comfortable with that motion? Like were you able to execute that? Kind of enjoy your surroundings and everything else while you were doing it?
Oh yeah. Like once you get, after you're out there for a while, it's just like walking. Like it's no effort. You're just there just doing it. And all you're doing is observing what's going on around you. Of course, there's a boat though. It rocks like 30 degrees, like either direction. So it's not a smooth row like this all day. You're doing this with the oars. Just to kind of keep the paddles in the water, like because as this goes up, you got to raise it up, and as it goes this way, you got to lower it down. So it's a lot of movement with the oars. It's not like crew or anything.
Yeah. This might be a silly question, but when you're rowing, are you facing your direction of travel, or are you going backwards?
Backwards.
You're going backwards. That's kind of what I picture.
The boat's going forward, but I'm facing backwards.
You're facing backwards to be able to get that motion you need.
Yeah.
Okay. And so take me into the cockpit of this boat. So how much space do you have to move? Like, how do you sleep? Can you stand up, walk around at all? Like, what's it feel like in there?
It's more space than the A-10. I'll give you that.
I would not want to be in an A-10 for 11 months.
No, I was in it for 11 hours one time, and I in a poopy suit. Oh,
You're good.
Yeah. So the space, it's the max width is 5 feet at the beam, so it's about that wide. And then it was probably maybe 6 feet of space. I'd have to measure it or look at the charts again, but 5 to 6 feet this way, going the length of the boat. And so the rowing seat runs the length of that over the water tanks. And then the very front of it, in the front of the rowing seat, I had a footwell where water could go in and where the foot stretchers were. And I had like basically the size of maybe about a foot on either side of me were the hatch covers, where I kept all the food and stuff. And then I had some cubbies that I could store immediate access items if I needed them.
And then how do you sleep in there?
So there's 2 cabins. There's the front cabin, which is the living cabin. It is where I slept, I cooked, the chart plotter and all the navigation stuff was in there. My maps are in there. And then the back cabin was for extra storage stuff. So I had my sea anchor, fishing gear, extra food, spare parts, all of that stuff was in the back. And basically the whole front was just one pad that I could just lay on in there. And then I had about a 4-inch thick pad in there. And then I just covered it with a blanket, and then I had a small pillow, and that was all I needed, really. I had another blanket on top of
Were you planning on sleeping like 8 hours like you do on land, or how does your sleep
not
schedule
continuously. I wanted to get solid chunks though. So I was planning on 4 hours, wake up and then check things, and if everything is good and it's calm enough, I can go row, and I would row for a little bit, and then come back in for 4 more hours of sleep. But if it was crazy outside and I couldn't row, it's more dangerous to row at night. And you can't see the waves coming, so it's not as fun if it's rough weather to row at night, and sometimes it's just not even feasible. So, but if it was those conditions, I would just get up, check things, look at the AIS, make sure there's no traffic coming my way, and then just get another 4 hours, and then wake up before dawn, and then get out there and do it again.
Wow. And how do you? Did you ever wake up from a sleep and find that you had just drifted off course, or?
Every time you wake up from sleep, you drifted off course.
Where am I?
Well, so normally, so if the wind was with me and like if I stopped rowing and the boat was going generally in the right direction, then I just would just sleep and then just check the position. But if the swells and the winds are taking me a different direction, like opposite, then I'd have to put out a sea anchor. It's like this 12-foot diameter parachute on a 250-foot line that just sinks into the deeper waters so that your boat kind of stabilizes with that deep water, and it helps a lot. So I had nights where, or weeks, I was stuck in the cabin for a week one time just because the winds just wouldn't let me go in the right direction. And it's painful to see you just slowly going in the wrong direction.
For a week.
For a week. Yeah. And there were some that I just floated in a circle just because it was just chaotic, winds coming from different directions. It depends on where you are within a high pressure system or low pressure system. Mm-hmm. And if you get stuck in the middle of one of those, then it kind of gets chaotic and you don't have it's not a steady wind. So you kind of want to be on the edges of those pressure systems to get the best winds.
Yeah. So what was your strategy for dealing with weather? So like, where we come from, we're looking at like, okay, what's the next 3 hours? What's the rest of the day kind of thing? Like, how are you planning for the weather and how are you getting your updates?
Okay. So with weather, the first thing I did is I did educational courses. So the first one I did was with Star Path School of Navigation in Seattle. So I did a couple of courses with them just to learn maritime navigation, really. And because there's a lot of different things that you don't think about from the water that you never think about in the air.
Like currents and...
Yeah, currents,
trade winds at the surface, all those things.
Yeah, and it's a lot of different factors. So once I learned all that stuff, then I consulted with a company called Weather Routing Incorporated, and they agreed to provide some weather routing services. The problem is those guys are designed for boats that are going 10, 15, 20 knots or whatever. So they're not used to dealing with guys that are barely moving across the water. So their forecasts were kind of designed for a little bit faster moving boats. So eventually I just downloaded the weather information myself via satellite and just plotted the different charts and went from there. So it was just me downloading maps from that point forward. But I had to plan for the seasons so that like I wasn't fighting the big weather patterns. So I had to leave at a certain time of year to take advantage of the southerly flow of winds. And I wanted to cross the equator at a certain time of year to catch southerly flows over there. And those are different times of year. So you kind of have to plan it to arrive there at the correct time. And if I would have arrived much later, the winds were going to start shifting from the northeast to the southeast as the season progressed. So I arrived at the tail end of the window for when I could have made it successfully, because I easily could have started getting more southerly winds that would not have allowed me to make my destination in Australia. I still was fighting southerly winds on the last day I was there. It's like I barely made my destination just because of those winds.
How are you tracking like all of these contingency plans? Like as you're thinking of everything that might happen and then what you're going to do, what your backups are, how are you managing all this?
Before you leave?
Yeah, like before you leave. How are you just organizing all this data?
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. You have to do it before you leave. Otherwise, you're going to be in a world of hurt. So what I did was I ended up just researching everything that I could. I got it's basically a 20-page document that I put together that had contingency plans for everything that I could possibly imagine. Search and rescue contacts for, all different locations, customs stuff for everywhere. And then, so what happens if I lose communication? What happens if I lose water? What happens if I lose electricity? And I just had a plan for all these different things. And then I had a plan for communicating that with my shore team, which is basically just my cousin and his wife. I was just checking in with them daily just so that they knew I wasn't dead. And so, yeah, I just had to do research and plan it and write it out and just think it through, what's the best way to handle it and what's the most likely. And then just write it out and say, this is what I'm planning on doing, and give it to the short team. And so they know my plans if they lose communication and, because I'll give them updates like, hey, this is starting to affect me. Like when my my rudder motor for the autopilot started making weird grinding sounds, which was obviously motors shouldn't be grinding. So I started communicating that with the shore team, so that's a contingency plan. So if I had lost comms there, then they might have known that I also lost my rudder. So luckily they were able to get me some schematics of that little motor. And trying to repair an electric motor at sea in a cramped space is difficult.
Oh my gosh. So the planning for this just sounds meticulous.
It's intense. Yeah. You got to think about a lot of different stuff.
What's the time frame you're putting in? Not when you're just kind of thinking about it, but when you're doing like the hardcore mission planning, like how long did that process go?
It's hard to say, man, because, the research part of it is part of it. That goes into the,
sure,
the full effort. But I know it was a good 2-year period that I was working on it. I mean, okay. I don't know how many hours a week I was putting in, but, a lot of those hours I was working on the boat, just, putting things together too. So I had plenty of time to sort through all the different contingencies if I needed them. And I would just add to it as I started thinking about it more. And then as I started talking to other guys that had been doing it, and they would give me tips. So like I went and tried to talk to other ocean rowers about their experiences and have incorporate their lessons that they learned. And yeah, it was plenty of planning, but it worked out because I know everybody's worried about, so what do you do if things go wrong? I was like, especially my family. It's like, well, ask me a question. Like, what do you, like, if what goes wrong? And then they peppered me with questions and I just had answered based on the plan that I already put together. And at that point, everybody was like, all right, I guess he's ready. So
he can answer all our questions. Yeah. So what is going through your what's your family thinking at this time? Are they supportive? Do they?
Some of them think it's cool. My mom was anti. She didn't want it to happen at all.
I understand that.
My dad was just nervous, I think, but he was excited too. He came down and met me in Australia along with my sister and her husband. So yeah, they were stoked about it. I mean, overall, it was a pretty positive response. I mean, I got concern from a lot of people. Like one of my aunts was like, "Are you sure you need to do this?" That kind of stuff. But it was pretty positive for the most part. Yeah.
How about like the bros, the fighter bros? Like what kind of feedback were they getting as they were hearing about this?
The fighter bros, it was hit or miss. Like there were some guys that were like, that's stupid. Why did you do that? It's like, okay, thanks.
Just couldn't compute.
Yeah, thanks for the support, bud. And then others were like, whoa, really? That's exciting. That's cool. So there was some negativity that came with it, Anytime you do something that is against the grain, or maybe it makes them jealous, so they react negatively, But either way, that's them dealing with what they're dealing with. It's just aggravating to deal with sometimes.
Were people like worried about you leaving your career? Because at this point, you've got 12 years of active duty time.
Right. Yeah.
That's only, I think they set this up on purpose because now you're like, wow, 2 to 3 assignments and you've got that good 20 and a pension. So I'm sure that, if not spoken, people are thinking that too. Like, oh, why didn't you just finish it out? Right.
I'm sure people thought that, but I don't think anybody really talked to me about it.
What was your thinking on that? Like you're at that 12-year point, you can separate or you can push to the finish line of retirement.
My thought was, all right, how much money would I have to make outside of the Air Force to make up for the amount of money I would have gotten from this pension, And so I was like, if I make $2 million outside of the Air Force, then that covers my entire pension. So like, all right, so let's just go make $2 million. So I'm going to figure that part out next.
Yeah. So you're just looking at it like, hey, I have this opportunity. You feel called to do it, and you're not going to let some structure, some institution keep you from doing it.
Yeah. It was scary for sure. But at that age, you're still real young and healthy, and you're not worried about, old age and retirement yet. And So it was a fairly easy decision for me. I mean, because I still had to drive because something's still missing. I got to go find it, whatever it is. And so it was an easy decision. I separated and just went on with life after that. Yeah.
All right. The last thing I'll ask about before we get into the actual journey is so having the boat actually constructed. You talked about being a part of that in Washington.
Yeah.
So like, how long did that take? And like, how did you fund it? Like, I'm sure this was not an inexpensive project.
It was too expensive. It was actually in Portland, Oregon, where it was built.
Okay.
Schooner Creek Boat Works. So at the time, I was working as a defense contractor. I was flying the MC-12, basically, or the Army version of that. So it was weird to fly Army aircraft as a civilian, but that's what I did. It was generally I'd do 2 months on, 2 months off. I would fly 2 months in Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever, come back and do 2 months at home where I would help and work on the boat. Sometimes I would just stay out there for 4 months, 5 months, just to get extra cash or whatever, and then come back and keep working on the boat. And then while I was over there, that's when I did more of the research, opportunity to like make sure I had the proper knowledge. So yeah, that was about it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah.
Man.
Wait. Oh, so the construction, sorry, to get more into the construction part of it. So there was a shipwright that was in charge of the whole process. And then basically I would just show up and I would ask the shipwright what's going on for the day. And then he'd be like, what can I do to help? And I would just go and he would assign me something and I would go do it. And I would ask questions about, why are they building it certain ways? Because I wanted to know exactly how it was put together, where all the hardware goes and what size nuts and bolts they are. So if I have to replace them, I had a bag of spare, hardware if I needed it. So I wanted to know exactly how it was constructed and why. So that was the big reason for me being a part of it. So if I could deal with whatever broke once it did happen out there. And so that was a real fun process. I mean, I learned a lot, and I got to see the construction of other boats they were doing. I got to meet a lot of sailors. So I would, ask experienced guys there, like different questions about ocean navigation and how they handle certain conditions. And it was a really cool experience. And then at the end of it is when we finally launched it. We did the launch party where I broke the champagne on the bow, which was fun. It's surprisingly harder than you think to break a champagne bottle. It dinged off the first time I hit it, and then I had to do it again. But the second hit worked fine. But then after that is when we did the stability testing. So we put it in the water and tried to turn it upside down and, make sure it went back upright and stuff like that. And then just rowing it and getting a feel for how, like the general layout and performance of the boat. And so, once I was happy with the performance of the boat and I outfitted it with, most of the stuff I would need on the trip, that's except for the food and, that kind of, and a couple spare parts. But I took it from there and then I trailed it to Puget Sound in Gig Harbor. And that's when I spent the 6 or 8 weeks up there doing the training.
Yeah, that sounds like a really smart way to go about it, to invest that time in the build process.
Yeah.
Because when you're out at sea, you clearly can't just call maintenance and have them fix it, right?
No. Luckily, I could dial a friend now if I needed to. So I had satellite phone, but there's limited minutes. So you only got certain minutes per month. So I would save the minutes till the end of the month. And then actually, I barely even used it. I think I made 2 phone calls while I was out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so as you're dealing with stuff, you actually know the ins and outs of this vessel.
Yeah. That was really important to me. And it was a great learning experience too.
All right, let's take a quick break and then we'll get into launching on this journey.
Let's do it.
Hey guys, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. First up is Papa Bear Naturals. Papa Bear makes all natural personal care products. So stuff like beef tallow balm, toothpaste, deodorant, and it's all without any of the chemical additives that you get with the mass-produced corporate stuff. And it's also sourced from local small ranches like this one. So check them out at papabearnaturals.com. Also like to thank Buffalo Wool Company. They make the best socks I've ever worn in my life. They're comfortable, they're breathable, they last, and they're all sourced with American buffalo wool and manufactured in America. So buffalowoolcompany.com, check them out. Also like to thank my Patreon supporters. $5, you can get the show early and ad-free. So without further delay, let's get back to the show. All right, so actually, I take it back. I want to know about one more thing before we launch
Let's do it.
into the Pacific Ocean. So,
All right.
what was like the medical preparation and like dealing with potential injuries and things like that?
Yeah. So while I was training, before I even got to Gig Harbor, when I was doing like the stability training or stability tests and stuff like that at Puget or in Portland. Right there on the Columbia River, I went out for just a little bit of practice and just get some rowing in and just check a few things out there. But it's a river, so you got to constantly be aware of where you're going. And so at one point, I wanted to test the ocean rowing hardtop and stand it up and kind of see how that might be. But unfortunately, like I didn't have any safety mechanisms put into the hardtop. So it was just a heavy carbon fiber thing that could fall down real easily. And of course, I lost my balance and I was starting to fall, and I grabbed the railing where this hardtop falls down onto. And the hardtop and just crashed right into my hand. And it gave me a big gash, like all the way down to the bone on my finger. So of course, now I had to get the boat into the, marina from a moving river. So that was an ordeal in itself with a big old towel. Like the shirt I had on, I just took it off and just wrapped it around my hand to keep from bleeding out. I wouldn't have bled out, but it was nasty. I just didn't want to get blood all over my boat, I guess. But when I got back in, I made it. I got stitches and everything was fine. But it got me thinking a lot more about this, self-care if something dangerous happens out there and I get a serious injury. So I ended up consulting with a sports medicine doctor at Washington State as well. And he told me, he basically was the guy that gave me all the drugs I needed. So all the antibiotics, I had medicine for any kind of major, medical condition that I could think of, or he could think of, anywhere from, lung care to eyes to ears to skin, all kinds of different medicines. But of course I had to manage, size and weight. So that was part of it too. And then after this experience, I was like, oh man, so I got to be able to do some suturing on my own body. And on a hand, I think that would be almost impossible. Just it's one-handed suturing. So I got some suture kits and I practiced on oranges and stuff just to make sure I could do it. And that's tricky, especially on yourself when you don't have any anesthetic. So luckily I didn't have to do that while I was out there. And luckily I didn't get injured while I was out there because of that injury on the river. It gave me much higher safety awareness because I did not want that to be a situation that I had to deal with at sea. That would be like row ending kind of injuries. And it could even get dangerous, especially if, close to an island somewhere and you get, thrown into rocks. If you can't row anymore, you could drift into something you shouldn't be drifting into. So I thought through that a lot, and just any kind of injury that I could think of, I thought of ways to mitigate it and what kind of medicine I would need. And basically I just had a bag full of gear that was immediately available if I needed it. So if I needed to stop, bleeding right away, I had bandages right there. And so I had all of my emergency supplies easily accessible from the cabin. So I had pretty much everything I needed. And luckily I didn't get any injuries. I cut my arm one time, But other than that, it was no big deal.
Did you ever get sick out there?
I did get sick once, and that was my own fault. I got food poisoning from stupidity, basically.
Eat some water-soaked food or some moldy
Well,
food?
so one thing that you don't get food-wise while you're out there is fresh vegetables. And so you still don't get fresh vegetables out there, but I had dried vegetables. And I didn't have enough of them because I really enjoyed that part of it. So every meal that I had, like if I was cooking noodles or, anything like that, I would just spice it up a little bit of, these freeze-dried noodles, and it kind of helped the flavor profile and that palatability thing. So I was just savoring these a little bit too long, and by the time I got to the bottom of the bottle, it started molding in the bottom, and I wasn't aware of it. And I was at night cooking with a red light on, so I couldn't see colors very well. And as I was putting these vegetables, I was sprinkling them into some noodles or something, and a chunk fell out. And it was nighttime, it was dark, and there was a red light. So I was like, maybe it was just a big chunk of vegetables, it'll be fine. But it ended up being a ball of mold. So I woke up violently ill and was ill for the next 24 hours, vomiting nonstop.
That was probably terrible, being sick at sea.
It was miserable.
Did you use any of your medicine that you had brought, or just needed to wait it out?
I might have used an anti-nausea pill but I don't know if I did. I don't remember taking anything for that, but waiting it out. And like the biggest thing I was concerned about is rehydration, because you're throwing up all the time. And if you can't get the water down, then you're going to dehydrate, and that can get dangerous real fast. So luckily I was able to rehydrate myself without too much trouble and moved on, but it was definitely a lesson learned.
Dude, that's quite the mission plan. I used to complain about like the 8 hours of mission planning before a really complex sortie.
Yeah.
Now, but 2 years of mission planning, that's a whole nother animal.
It is. Yeah. You can't call a red ball or do anything.
The abort isn't just a quick duck into the closest airport, right?
Exactly.
Or the divert. But all right, cool. So do you remember the date when you actually launched on this journey, just to frame it for everyone?
Okay, I think it was May, June, July, right? I think it was July 7th, 2018 to June 6th, 2019. I believe. You can check my website to double check.
No, that's good. Good enough.
Yeah, it was exactly 11 months, 336 days, but generally around that time.
Pre-COVID, so
pre-COVID.
The world hadn't gone completely.
I wish it was
yet.
actually during COVID. That would have been better.
No doubt. Yeah, we can talk about that later. But getting back after that into COVID had to be just blow your mind.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
Like, what happened?
Yeah.
I need to go back out.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So now you launch on this journey. So again, this is a world record for open ocean rowing. It is 11 months, 7,000 miles. It's solo by yourself. Unsupported, so no help in any way, and then continuous, so no stops. Mm-hmm. So what duration did you think it was going to take you? Did you say 10 months?
Yeah, so it was 7,145 statute miles in a straight line.
Yeah.
But over the ground, it ended up being closer to 10,000 miles.
10,000 miles in a rowboat.
Yeah. It was pretty long.
Daunting.
Daunting, yeah. I already lost the question.
No, so I'm just kind of framing it for the audience. Like you're embarking on this. We look at these endurance athletes, and they're incredible, and I'm completely motivated by David Goggins and Cam Hanes and all these guys that are doing these amazing things. But like you just took it up to a level that is it's hard to imagine. So just you leaving Washington State and going out for what is going to be probably at least 10 months.
Yeah, you're right. So I was hoping it would be about 10 months, but it ended up being 11. And my initial planning, I was hoping to get up to a year of food on board, but it just ended up, I could only squeeze in about 10 months of food.
So what's this? So you launch, you're now just paddling offshore. What's
Well,
this?
yeah, before I even leave, like, so I was at this in Nia Bay, which is at a Indian reservation, Native American reservation, and it was that was pretty neat because those guys there were super friendly. Like I was living on the boat, and fishermen out there would come by and just give me some salmon after they got done fishing. And there was a little shop there that would cook it for me, and so it was it was a cool environment to leave from.
Just packed full of nutrients before you get out the door.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah. And then before I left, like ladies from the restaurant came out and gave me like a bag of oranges. Like, just take some fresh fruit before you leave.
Dude, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
it was nice. But yeah, but the night before, I started really feeling the nerves kick in, and like as it gets closer and closer, you're like, all right, once I push off from that dock, I'm not touching land again for a long, long time. So it was very nerve wracking. And even it was nerve wracking the whole first day because, like, the biggest thing I was worried about the first couple of days was getting clear far enough from shore that if I fell asleep, I wouldn't end up back on shore. So, yeah, it was pretty tough the first couple days, especially.
So now you're just trying to fight your way off kind of the coastal systems.
Yeah, because the Strait of Juan de Fuca right there, it has some pretty significant currents. So I had to plan it with the tides. So you got tidal influences. You got different currents based on the inlet, and then you got the winds on top of that. So I had these conditions that were the winds were not cooperating as much as I wanted. So it was more of a northwesterly wind. Northwesterly. I wanted a northeasterly wind. So I was kind of fighting that. It kept trying to push me back to shore. So I was kind of hugging the coastline for the first couple of weeks. And I was trying to break away from the coast to get a good distance and like get well clear of the continental shelf so that you're in the actual proper oceanic, how the deep water ocean behavior is.
How long did it take you to start to go from Jacob on the shore and going into the initial phases of this journey to kind of the acceptance phase of this is your new life on this boat?
Probably took a couple weeks. I was like we were talking about at the beginning, it's such a disorienting new environment. I mean, while I had been living on the boat, I hadn't been living on the boat that wasn't tied to a marina or tied to a dock. And I hadn't been living on the boat when it was in the deep ocean. So it was a completely different environment. And I also hadn't been consistently putting in 6,000 calories a day into my body, which maybe I should have started doing that beforehand. But either way, that first couple of weeks was getting rough. And then I was getting frustrated that I couldn't get off the shore. So eventually I was fighting, I was trying to fight the situation too much. So I was, getting worked up in my mind and getting frustrated, and then I wasn't feeling well. And so eventually I had to get to this place where I just accepted it and just said, all right, this is where you live now. So whatever you got to do, this is your starting point. So move forward from here.
Nice.
Yeah.
So a couple weeks in, you start getting a good battle rhythm, maybe sleeping better and stuff.
Once, after a couple weeks, 3 weeks, you get into a real nice rhythm. Obviously the weather plays a factor into that if you're going to sleep well. And then you just kind of get into, a pattern of behavior every day, and then it becomes consistent, and then you just have a lifestyle that you live, every day out there.
Try to describe the difference between your life on land, just the normal day-to-day struggles, of getting by, getting through the day, and then what your new life is like out on the boat.
Yeah. Well, completely different concerns, of course. On land, obviously you have concerns that everybody has with bills and jobs and relationships and kids and everything else from normal day life. But all of that just goes away, once you leave, and all your life is just going into this thing where it's like, how do I survive and how do I move forward one day at a time? How do I keep myself pointing in the right direction and moving in the direction I want to go? And how do I stay healthy? And that's all you think about, really. I mean, I was focusing on some other stuff like meditation. And of course I had things to distract me if I needed to. So I had podcasts and audiobooks and, different, listening entertainment, music, of course. So It was, yeah, it was an interesting journey to get to this place where you could actually feel comfortable and have what feels like a normal life for you, and like stable life that you feel like you could sustain indefinitely, basically. Instead of being the guy that's crying in the cabin for home, I wanted to find a rhythm that felt comfortable that I could do indefinitely, is what I was looking for.
Yeah, just get to that acceptance phase. So once you're offshore and now you're kind of in the start of the middle journey, if you will, when was like the first time you experienced adversity?
Oh, well, I guess the first time was the first day.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like after you get offshore.
Yeah, so it was tough getting offshore, and then the first major, like I had a pretty good run once I got off the shore. I was able to make a pretty good pace for a week. I'd have to look at the ground track to know for sure how far I made it, but it was when that first high pressure system finally centered over me. So when you're in the middle of the high pressure system, it's like no wind basically, or it's chaotic, from different directions. And then that's when I first had to put the sea anchor out and wait out the weather. I can't remember if it was a low pressure or if it was a high pressure. But
so this is where you basically just can't move.
Yeah, you can't move. So like if the wind is against you in one of those big ocean rowing boats, then it's you're not going to win. And like in calm water, you could probably beat out 10 knots pretty easily. But out in the open ocean, when you're dealing swells and waves and the wind, then it's too hard to fight against the weather.
And so, like psychologically, was it difficult just being at the mercy of the system?
Well, I mean, at first it was and it's frustrating whenever you're sitting on a sea anchor for 4 or 5 days, drifting the wrong way slowly. It does get to you a little bit, but like I said, once I got to that acceptance phase, and I just, no matter what it was, like why would I get frustrated about this? It's like it is what it is. So deal with it, and whenever the weather's good, just keep moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How now are you connecting with the natural world out here?
Yeah, the natural world, that was one of the, obviously you're out there 100% connected to nature because all you're doing is sitting on the water with just you and nature around you at all times. And the first couple of weeks, I didn't really think about it too much because I was just trying to get my bearings. But once I got into that rhythm where I was living like a daily lifestyle, then I could really start to appreciate everything that was around me a lot more. So yeah, I started to gain a better understanding of how the global weather patterns work. So I was thinking from the perspective of entire systems moving across a hemisphere as opposed to what does the local area weather going to be for a flight. So it's just a different mentality of how you think about it. And so that part of it was cool because then you can start thinking about different, you start paying attention a lot more to the cycles of nature. So I would log every day in my logbook the moon phase percentage. I would log sunrise, sunset time, and I would track every day like what time the moon and the sun are coming up and what time they're going down, and where is it going to be in the sky? What's the illumination going to be, and all these different factors that are just these cycles that you don't normally think about, but they become part of your everyday awareness. And then once it's part of your awareness and it integrates into you in a way that I didn't really appreciate as much on land, because it feels like you're part of Earth a lot more, you're part of nature a lot more, because you are understanding and feeling firsthand what these cycles of nature are doing and how it's affecting the environment around you. And learning all of that was incredible. But also then you get into the wildlife stuff where there's all kinds of fun stuff we can talk about with the wildlife.
Yeah, like I remember I followed along this journey from when you left until you got there just by reading the blog and watching the little tracker.
Yeah. My
wife and I would talk about it every day because it's like, hey, my A-10 buddy is out there rowing across the Pacific. Something that struck me at that time is the way you would describe in detail, like the birds that would land on your boat,
Right.
and the fish you would see, and you had an experience with sharks as well, right?
I had a few experiences with sharks. Yeah, they would follow me around quite a bit. Those sharks. I had a pack, like I don't know what they're called. A group of sharks are called. There's four of them. There was four of them at least four that followed me for months, and I saw them actually get bigger as I was traveling. They would leave for a little while, and then and then they would come back, and I would slowly see them growing. But so it's a it's a big wide ocean. So anytime there's shade somewhere, it's going to attract like little fish. So all the little fish start showing up, and then that attracts the bigger fish. And then you start getting to the 4-foot size fish that are jumping around you. Tunas and yellow.
And for those who haven't seen the boat, like this isn't a large vessel. Like it's 28 feet, right, in total length.
Yeah.
And you're sitting like really low because you have to row, right? So
I can go like this and touch the water. That's like,
it's probably kind of a little bit scary if these sharks are right there.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of separation.
No, and like it's creepy sometimes because their dorsal fin would scrape on the bottom of my boat, like when they're trying to catch stuff under there. Yeah, the first time I heard that, I was like, ooh, that's creepy. Because they have the rough skin on the paint under there, and it's just like, yeah.
Wow.
It's unnerving.
Did you ever have to leave the boat to like clean the boat or any like maintenance or anything, like leave your little like standard stations?
Yeah, and I didn't enjoy it at all. Like, so swimming, I thought I might enjoy it, but I didn't. It was just too many unknowns for my comfort. And but I had to force myself to go swim to clean the barnacles off the bottom of the boat because it'll slow you down, half a knot or easily if you let it build up too much.
How cold was it out there?
Well, up here it was really cold, but by the time I got to Hawaii, it felt great. Yeah, and in the tropics, it was almost like bathwater. So it varied quite a bit. Yeah, so I would get out there and scrape off the barnacles, but I would have to wait until it was a real calm day, because like the boat you could slam down on you if it's bobbing up and down, and then it's harder to see wildlife approaching if it's choppy and stuff, and it's just not practical. So it would have to be a calm day, and I would scan the horizon for a good 5 minutes, checking for sharks to make sure there's nothing around. And luckily, nothing got too close except for one time. But
yeah, well, tell me about that one time.
Yeah, that one time, I guess we got to tell that story. So, yeah, one night, I guess it was like a mast buoy or something like that landed on the back of the boat. So it was like a seabird, about like that big. And they would like to chill out on the back of the boat at night and just rest. And in the morning, they would take off. And it was always cool to see them and try to get close to them and stuff. Yeah, I got close enough where one of them tried to bite my finger. It depended on the kind of bird, how aggressive they were. The boobies were aggressive, but other birds weren't as aggressive. But that bird had landed, and he slept on the back of the boat, and I went to go sleep. And then when I woke up in the morning, he was gone, but he had left a nice present for me out on the solar panel that I had to clean up. And so I went out there, and it was a relatively calm morning, so I didn't physically attach myself to the boat like I should have. And so I'm on my hands and knees on the very back of the boat, wiping the solar panels, cleaning them off. And I got distracted by these birds that just showed up, a huge flock, thousands, like literally thousands of birds. And you see them just diving into the water, and it's just like a show out there. And so I saw this happening, and then as I'm distracted by this, a wave comes in and throws me off the back of the boat into the ocean, and I'm not attached to it.
Damn.
I'm not attached to the boat. So, I mean, as soon as my head popped out of the water, the boat is already in front of me, and it's starting to leave. So I have already 6 to 8 feet between me and the tail of the boat. And so I just, heart rate immediately up, and I'm swimming. And then I finally get to the center of the boat where I can pull myself in. And as soon as my feet cleared the water, there was like 2 8-foot sharks right under my feet. And
oh my gosh.
They got real close too. And so I didn't know if they would have taken a bite that time or just, checked out what it was. But as soon as they heard that sound, they came investigating of my body hitting the water. Yeah, so that was pretty scary. Got the heart rate up on that one.
And did you just scramble up onto the boat as fast as you could?
Oh yeah, yeah, and then just took a good few deep breaths for a while.
Wow. Yeah, that probably took a minute to recover from. And
Yeah, and it was another reminder, and another one of those like safety checks to say, all right, you got to recage your safety meter again. But other than that, time, I didn't have any unfortunate uh, capsize or anything like that where I fell out of the boat.
nice. Did you have any weather issues? Hit any storms?
Yeah, I mean, luckily the Pacific is relatively calm, but I mean, being out there for 11 months, you can't miss hurricane season. So I tried to plan around it the best I could. And luckily in the northern hemisphere, I avoided most of the hurricanes for the most part. They got somewhat close and to the south of me. So I was feeling the effects of the hurricanes, but I wasn't getting huge breaking waves or anything like that. I was getting really strong winds and swells and stuff coming from one direction from the south. And so when that happens, you just have to put the sea anchor down and wait it out. And luckily those lines are strong enough. I was really worried that parachute would, I mean, because it's a lot of force that's getting pulled on that boat. And luckily it was fine throughout the journey, but that sea anchor eventually did blow out eventually when I was in close to Australia, thankfully. But that was a critical piece of equipment. And if I wouldn't have been close to shore in Australia, I don't know if I could have continued because that's how important that piece of equipment is.
Do you ever get hit by any big waves?
Yeah, the waves are crazy, man. Like the swells aren't too bad. The only thing, if the swells are coming from the wrong direction, it might make it a little harder to go in the direction they're coming from. But otherwise, it's just big rolling hills that you're just kind of, But when you get the swells in combination with the waves, that's when it can get a little bit more chaotic. So yeah, I got into a really bad storm in the South Pacific over the Coral Sea. It was a tropical cyclone. Anne was her name.
She sounds nice.
Yeah, she wasn't too mean to me, but she did break a bunch of stuff on my boat. So it was a nighttime, pitch black, no moon out. It's overcast, of course. So it's literally zero visibility. You can't see anything. Can't see where the waves are or when they're going to hit you or anything like that. So I was, waiting it out inside the cabin, but it was at a time when luckily the winds were still kind of pushing me towards shore. So I wasn't attached. I didn't have a sea anchor out during this. So I was still trying to kind of keep moving in the right direction. But this tropical cyclone came for me, and I got a little bit too broadside to the waves, and I got this one huge wave that was catastrophic. I was sitting inside of the cabin, and the only way you can kind of tell what's happening to the boat is in this situation is listening to the sounds that are going on. What do the winds sound like? What do the waves sound like? And the water hitting your boat, what does that sound like? And then the rhythms of the waves and how does it feel? And just what you have from your instruments on your chart plotter. And so I was getting a feel for when the big ones are going to come and you brace for it. But then there was one it got to the point where the rain just stopped. Like it just felt like it was just like it got cut out completely. So I was just sitting inside of the cabin and I'm thinking, all right, did the rain actually stop, or is there a wave between me and the boat? And unfortunately, it was the second one, and it crashed hard.
So the wave is so big that it's blocking the rain from hitting your boat.
Correct. It was intense.
Terrifying.
And it crashed and it hit the what side was it on? Port side of the boat, and it hit with such force. I had 2 oars on each side of the boat stored on each side of the boat, and then I had 2 in the rowing area. And those 6 oars are all made out of wood, and they're full length oars. And then I had 2 that were in the aft cabin that were breakdown style that you could put into pieces and then pop them back together if you needed them. And then that was my last resort oar if I needed it. So Up to this point, I think I'd broken one oar. There was a situation where, I don't know, it just got caught in the wrong wave at the wrong time. The paddle broke off. So now it's down to 5 wooden ones. Or maybe, I don't remember how many I'd broken at that point. Maybe it was 1 or 2. But either way, the wave hit on that side so hard that it ripped the oars off of the boat. And luckily, I lashed it good enough on the back side of the boat that it stayed on the boat. But now the oars, because the paddles were in this little front cubby area, so it just kind of sat in a cubby. It wasn't tied to anything. So the water was forced in there hard enough to pull the oar out of that cubby. So I had to physically bend the oar to get the end of the paddle out of that cubby. And when it did that, the oars kind of drifted backwards because I was still going with the wind, and the oars are now going this way. So by the time this wave, by the time the wave hit me, like I was in the boat, and it was stupid of me, but I had the hatch door cracked a little bit for ventilation, and that's exactly where all the water got forced into the cabin, completely swamped the entire cabin. And so now I have a boat full of water, and I'm hearing a creaking sound, so like a new sound. And you never want new sounds when you're at night in a hurricane. So I'm like, I got to figure out what this sound is, because something is going on out there, and it's the middle of the night, and it could be something critical, and I just got to check it out. So in the middle of the storm, I'm like, I put on the harness, and I attach myself to the boat, and I'm trying to get out there, close the cabin behind me, and of course you can't see the waves. So it's just like you're just listening, and when things get quiet, I'd have to duck down and brace myself and just make sure I don't get thrown off the boat with the next wave. And so I finally get out there, and I see that the oars are pointing behind me, and like I can't lose 2 more oars. So I'm like, I got to figure out how to get these back into the boat. And I was like, I don't know how to do that because there's no way I can reach them physically. Like even if I went to the aft hatch and like pop my head out of that hatch and try to get them in, it's just like I wouldn't have the leverage to pull them in because you got 11-foot sticks pointing behind you, and you got to somehow get them through the water to the front, while it's moving through the water. So I ended up just like, and this is happening in the middle of the hurricane or the tropical cyclone, and so I create this little lasso system where I ended up putting them, I somehow get them around the oars, I tighten it up, and then I just pull it in like you're pulling in a calf at the rodeo. And I finally got it back up, and then I lashed everything down the best I could. And then I get back into the boat and seal it up. Now I have to deal with getting all the water out of the boat. And that was another challenge in and of itself. It was a pain to clean the water out of there. And I had to do it multiple times.
So just water flowing through the entire vessel.
So water flows in, and basically what it did was there was a footwell where I could do most of my work and, put my feet down, and that was completely full of water. And then the water just gets in all the hatches, and then it just swamps all of your, dry stuff, your bedding and everything. And that's the most annoying part, is drying the sheets. So if you're ever at sea and you need to dry clothes, make sure you wash them in fresh water first, because they dry a lot quicker and they're cleaner. So yeah, but that was the worst night for sure. And I got up in the morning and I checked those oars, and they had cracked the blades. So they were gone anyway. So by the time I tried to use them, the oars just broke anyway.
So how many oars did you have left?
I had 2.
So down to your last 2.
2 left, yeah.
Of your regular oars.
2 of the regular oars left, yeah.
Wow. Did you lose any food to water damage?
Yes, yeah, I did. So that's one thing with custom hatches. Like custom hatches are notoriously hard to get sealed properly. So that would be the one design change that I would have definitely would do differently next time, is just do a regular hatch that has solid seals that keep the water out 100%, because mine did not. Every single one of them leaked.
So not just from this wave, just in general, some of your compartments flooded?
Well, so luckily that I didn't experience that on the inside of the cabin for a while, but on the outside of the cabin, waves would always go over into the rowing area, and that's just common.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the gunnel is only like this high off the ocean. Maybe it's a little bit higher, but either way, those I didn't even realize it until because I wasn't even planning on opening them because it was just spare food, and I would only have to get into those hatches about once a week because I had a week's worth of supplies inside of the boat, and then food supplies, and then once that week was over, I'd just go back into the hatches and just refill the week, and by the time I got to the refill week, all of them were just filled with water.
Oh no!
And of course, everything was like vacuum sealed, and but not all the vacuum seals actually held.
Yeah, they're probably not rated to be soaked in salt water, right?
Yeah, especially for weeks at a time. I don't know, but I definitely lost some food that way. And the first time the first time it happened, it was eye opening that I didn't realize how easily those hatches leaked, which was the bane of my existence while I was out there. Keeping water out of those things was a pain.
About how much food did you lose to that?
I lost at least 3 weeks worth of food, probably. Yeah.
So you had to make 9 months of food remaining stretched to 11 months.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's what I was talking about towards the end.
Right.
It got close, and like I had fishing gear on board if I needed it, and but the problem with it is that I only had a limited supply of fishing gear because space and weight. So all I did, I took the fishing gear out a couple of times just to test it, see if I could catch anything. I caught a couple fish, and then I was like happy with it, and I was like, all right, I can catch fish, I can survive if I need it. But then I would just save the fishing equipment for later, and I was close to breaking it back out again to supplement my diet towards the end. But by the time I started thinking a lot about that, I was within a couple of weeks of shore, so it ended up not being a factor.
Was there ever a time on this journey that you felt like you might not make it, or were you just determined and proceeding the whole way?
Yeah. Let's see. The first time I thought about it, so like I was saying at the beginning or earlier, it's like when I was trying to get off the Oregon coast and towards Hawaii, there was a period in which I got delayed quite a bit. I was just behind schedule. So as I was looking at the logbook, I would plot how many plus or minus days do you think it would take to make it? And I got up to the point where it was like, you're going to make it at this pace, you're going to make it in 22 months. So it's like, okay, well, that's not going to work. So I started thinking about different, contingency plans for, where I might stop. So at that point, I was thinking maybe I might not make it. But luckily, by the time I got to Hawaii, I started, getting into the stride and hitting some good weather where I really picked up my pace and I caught up quite a bit.
Oh, really? So just kind of, I don't know, God smiling at you.
Yeah, I had a good stretch for a while, especially I got real lucky through the equator.
Yeah, isn't there some issue at the equator that can hold people up?
Yeah, so if you think about the way the hemispheres, the patterns work, so everything is basically going west or clockwise in the northern hemisphere and counterclockwise in the southern hemisphere. When you think about like the high pressure will go clockwise in the northern and the high pressure will go counterclockwise in the southern hemisphere. And so there's counter forces at the equator. So there's an equatorial countercurrent that runs the opposite of the general trend of the ocean. So everything is generally moving west to east, but there's an equatorial countercurrent that's moving, wait, how's it going? I'm thinking of the currents are generally going with the direction I wanted to go, but the equatorial countercurrent is going west to east. So it could have pushed me back towards like South America if I got caught up into it for too long. But I was communicating with guys at Starpath School of Navigation, and he's like a wizard. He's written books on it. And he was helping me. Like I just texted him just for this equatorial crossing, and he was like, "Oh, cool! I could help you find a good spot." And I don't know how much it helped, but it was a cool exercise for him and his students in his class because he was posting videos and stuff about it. But either way, I was expecting a lot more ground loss to the east crossing the equator. But luckily, I didn't lose really anything to the east, and I cut through it pretty quick. So I got lucky through there, and it really helped pick up the pace.
When did you start seeing the finish line in sight, like mentally?
The finish line? Oh man, probably by the time I saw Papua New Guinea. What's the Solomon Islands? Is that the one? I'm already forgetting the island names. But the last major island chain before you get into once I entered the Coral Sea, basically, once you get past those island chains, so you got Papua New Guinea and you got some island chains down here. Once I got through there and I was in the Coral Sea proper, then I started feeling hopeful. But then that's also when I got hit by that tropical cyclone.
So just like highs and lows.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then after my sea anchor busted, I was like starting to get concerned that I might not make it to shore. And then there were some touch and go moments in the last weeks where I was like, because you're dealing with the Great Barrier Reef, and so there's a lot of obstacles, a lot of dangerous rocky shores. There's a lot of hazards out there. So, and if you have weather that's not cooperating with you in those conditions, you could get yourself in a dangerous situation quickly, But I really kind of just kept it out of my mind. Like either I'm going to make it or I'm not. So I would plot where I'm at. And if it got to the point where I had to start making changing plans, like maybe I had to stop at a different island somewhere, then that's when I would make that decision. So I didn't worry about it really.
When did you know you had it made?
When I finally anchored on, I anchored on Flynn Reef in the Great Barrier Reef. And once I anchored there, then I was like, yeah, I think I got it from here. But that was a precarious day because I was approaching the shore at night. And of course, like I have no sea anchor, so I can't slow down if the weather is pushing me in the wrong direction. Of course, I got strong southerlies that are pushing me towards the north and into the Great Barrier Reef areas that I don't want to go. And I'm not going to be able to make it to shore in these conditions, so I had to figure something out. So I decided to anchor on a coral reef, and there was one called Flynn Reef that I ended up anchoring on. I tried to anchor on one before that and completely missed it. And I realized how quickly I'm going to pass by this and how quickly the depth of the water changes. I only got so much anchor line. So I got to find a place on the coral reef that's shallow enough for me to anchor, and also not too shallow that I hit the coral reef. So, and then not miss it completely, because sometimes they drop off quickly, and either way. So I missed the first one, and then so the second one I got a little bit too close, and that's when I did a tiny little scrape, and but I was able to anchor on that reef, and I stayed there for 3-4 days until the weather changed. And so I was waiting for the weather to change so I knew I could make it to shore, but it was looking bad. And there was a tiny weather opening that I could maybe make it. And my family is flying in and they're landing there. So I either make this window or it could be another 5 days and then my entire family is come and gone, So I just went for it. And it was probably not the best day to do it, because 1 day later it was perfectly calm against the forecast.
Of course.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was about the time that I thought, I was like, yeah, I got this. I'm home free.
All right. So talk me through landing in Australia.
Yeah, that landing. So I was planning on going to Cairns Harbor. I ended up, so when I left Flynn Reef, I left early in the morning, or right when the weather broke is when I left. And then I rode all day, all night until I finally make it into the harbor. And, but I'm getting pushed more and more to the north. And I wanted to go to the southern area of this harbor in the shallow waters where I actually anchor on the land. And that's what I told the Coast Guard I was going to do. And of course, the first thing he said was, don't go in the water, you'll get eaten. There's crocodiles in there. So, but I didn't make it to this crocodile area. I ended up having to anchor. I just made it past the main shipping lane. I found a place to anchor, and I anchored 5 miles from shore. And that was a crazy awakening, because I've been in the deep blue expanse for 11 months, and when I rode in at night, so all I'm seeing is the coastline with lights, so I don't see the greenery or anything. And then I wake up in the morning And then I knew it was going to be different because the refraction of the water through the windows and stuff was like a greener color. I was like, oh man, I'm in emerald water now. This is different. And you get out, and the first time I see this coastline, I see trees, and it's just amazing. So that morning, I also waited for the volunteer Coast Guard. It was an Australian volunteer Coast Guard that was out there helping me. I had a contact there that I could call if I needed help, and he would give me advice and stuff like that. And they had organized this trip where they would pick up my dad and my family, and they would get onto the ocean rowing, or they would get onto the Coast Guard vessel. So they got this, big yellow Coast Guard boat, twin engine diesel kind of thing. And they all got on there, and they drove out, and they met me at my anchor point. And then I just, at that point, I just cut anchor and started rowing, and they just followed me to shore. And so my first objective was Cairns Harbor Marina, the one in the south, and then there was one at Yorkie's Knob that I wanted to get to, which is what ended up where I ended up staying. But instead of actually doing a nice pull into the marina, the wind was pushing me too far to the north, and I made it within like maybe a quarter mile of the entrance. And so I didn't quite make it. So I had to make a decision at some point because I was headed straight towards a rocky outcropping. So instead of trying to cut the corner and make it into the marina, I was like, let's just cut towards make a quick right turn, and then there's a sandy beach right there. It's called Trinity Beach. So I just pointed with the wind, and now I'm just going with the wind directly towards the shore. And then I break out the radio, and I just start talking to the Coast Guard and letting them know what's happening. And then, because I wanted to make landfall of my own accord, so hitting the sand, but with your boat and touching ground with your feet. You don't have to pull into a dock, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, you did it at that point. If anyone wants to quibble with that, they can go away.
So now I'm just like sitting, I'm standing up, like I got the top. All right, now I'm just standing through the front window, and I'm looking forward. I'm just trying to get to a place that looks the safest. And then as I'm approaching the shore, it's a relatively steep shore. And so when I finally make impact, as I'm about to make impact, I see this Australian guy with a white polo shirt and some red swimming shorts. And then as I'm approaching, he just stops and looks at me. He goes, "'Tis a bit dodgy, isn't it?" Like,
a bit.
It's very dodgy, man. And I hit the shore, immediately jump out, and as I jump out of this boat, and since the shore is steep, and my legs aren't quite working right, I just fall underwater immediately. And it took me a second to get my balance. I get my balance. Now all these Aussies are coming out to try to help stabilize the boat. And I'm just trying to keep it from broaching on shore and just rolling with the waves. So all these guys came out, and we took out my bow line, and everybody that was on shore was just holding the line to try to keep the bow perpendicular to the shore. And eventually, the Australian lifeguards grabbed my stern line, and then they swim out or paddle out to this smaller Coast Guard boat that was milling around. And they pulled me off the shore, and then they finally just towed me the next half mile or whatever it was.
So as soon as you beach and step off that boat, the row's over, you won.
Yeah, it was crazy too, because they were all waiting for me at the marina. So as soon as I made the call, they all had to get in their cars and drive over to this other place. So they're rushing to get to shore. But when they finally show up, and I just see all kinds of people there. There's a newsman already there with his camera, bright light pointing at me. People are already trying to ask me questions, and it was a little bit disorienting. But
what was it like being on your own 2 feet?
It was weird.
Like when you jumped off the boat. On
land, I've been on my feet on the boat, but I hadn't done much walking. So the problem was the walking part. So all those little tiny muscles and like your ankles and knees and wherever they are, those got sore real quick. It took me a good 2 weeks to get back to regular walking.
Dude, that is just incredible, man. Like, people use the word legendary a lot, and it's overused maybe, but this is like legit legendary. Like, it's up with the greatest adventures of all time. I mean, it's a legit world record.
I appreciate that.
No one has ever done it. No human has ever accomplished that, and you did. It's just, it's magnificent. It's incredible. I can't come up with the right descriptive words. But it's amazing, man.
Thanks, man.
It's like no matter what happened before or after that, like you made a mark. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, it was a costly one, but it was one that I would do again. Like, all the things that you talked about, losing careers and pensions and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, it's scary a little bit now, but I'll figure it out. It'll be fine.
Yeah. So talk me through, you wrap up this mission, and then now we're not too far from the world going completely bananas with COVID. Like, what's your transition like back to real life?
Yeah, it was tough. It still is a little bit, but so when I first landed in Australia, I just stayed my entire length that I could with my tourist visa. And I ended up volunteering at this yoga retreat place. It's just south of Sydney. I rented a camper van and just drove all along the coast, and eventually ended up at this retreat place, and I did a work exchange program there. I gave them some, 4 or 5 hours a day. They gave me room and board, and they also had a bunch of yoga classes there and different workshops that I could do. And so I was doing yoga twice a day, and I fell in love with it. And eventually, after my visa ran out, I decided to go do a yoga teacher certification over in Peru. So I went to the mountains of Peru in Cusco.
Wait a minute. So I think you might be the only person in history who's fighter pilot, world record setting rower / yoga instructor. Talk about a paradox.
It is. I guess that's my whole existence as one paradox.
Yeah. You make it work. Anyhow, sorry, continue.
It's all right. So yeah, I make it to this yoga training. I was there for 6 weeks, and it was a magical experience just being up there. And of course, you're in talk about a completely 180 like environment and culture from fighter pilot world, this yoga world. So I went into I did that. I got my certification. I ended up getting back to the United States. I make it to Texas, visit all my family in Texas. And then I ended up doing a road trip all the way from Texas up to Portland, Oregon, where my boat is going to arrive via cargo ship. So I put my boat on a cargo ship in Sydney, up there near Cairns. I put it on a boat there, and it landed in Portland shortly after I got there. So it was cool to see Emerson finally get back to Portland, and made it back to the same yard it was built, and they're going to store it there for me for a little while before I could figure out what to do with it. Yeah, and then once I got that taken care of, then I had to think about income again, because
back to the real world.
So my plan at the time was to do 2 months on, 2 months off again with a defense contract job, get the money back, in a healthy place where I pay off all the, loans and stuff I have for this boat and stuff. So I get hired by the company that I was working for before I left. I get my requal done in the King Air. And then I make it to Fort Bliss, and I make it through all the pre-deployment training, all my CBTs and all the stupid things you have to do before you deploy. And I have the paper to get onto the rotator to fly out of the country. And the first plane that was canceled was the one, due to COVID, was the one that I was supposed to be on. So, and if you're not overseas working, you're not making money. So I didn't have a house. I didn't have anywhere to live. I didn't have anything.
Wow.
All the stuff I owned, really, other than my boat, were just with me at the time. So I had to figure out where to go. So I ended up finding a friend to live with down in Florida that ended up becoming more than friends. And so now I've lived there ever since. It's been a good few years now.
What's next for you?
Yeah, I'm still working it out, man. So the thing with the flying job is COVID, eventually I lost the job because I couldn't get out there to go do it. Which means because I was also having holdups with my security clearance, because I wasn't employed while I was at sea, so it dropped off. So it was taking time to get it back up and running. And but after I lost that job, then now I have to do a brand new SF-86,
It's all your security clearance paperwork
stuff.
Complete disaster.
Yeah, you have to do the interviews, all that stuff takes a year, and so I lost my security clearance, so I couldn't get another defense contracting job. And then once I tried to go get my medical recall, annual medical exam you have to do as pilots, and I was unable to pass my eye exam. And I ended up going to an ophthalmologist and find out I have an eye condition that's rare and nobody knows what happened. And it's supposed to clear itself up on its own, but it's disqualifying to fly.
Just like, so no commercial flying.
You just don't get your
anything.
medical. So if you don't have a medical, you don't fly.
So now you can't be a professional pilot.
Not right now, no, unless my eyeballs get fixed somehow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough because it's like that's what you've done your whole adult life.
It's devastating, dude. That's like, that's the only thing I know how to do to make a decent living. So now I have to create a whole new career. It's just, it's been a little bit depressing going through that, but it's motivated me to kind of think of different directions because I'm not going to make that $1 to $2 million being a defense contractor. I got to think about maybe going into the business world and coming up with my own way through life and my own way to make money. And so I'm working on that right now. I got meetings in Palo Alto next week to kind of sort through what the plan's going to be.
Well, man, you're a living legend. Like you deserve all the success in the world. I mean, I'm honored to be your friend. Like
thanks, man.
It's pretty. You're just an extraordinary person. Like the things you've accomplished in your life. It was cool being your friend when we were flying the Hog together.
Yeah. Do you remember any missions that we actually did together?
The only time, again, I remember we crossed paths was like a little bit in Korea.
Yeah.
We may have flown together on a 4-ship in the Requal in 2013.
Oh, because you didn't go to Korea after that requal. Not.
Yeah, I stayed at DM.
You stayed at DM
in Tucson. So, we just like throughout my whole career, I felt like we kind of kept crossing paths, here and there. But and then when I saw you embark on this adventure and following along on social media, I thought it was awesome, and I still do. I mean, a lot of people, what do they talk about? Like the quiet lives of desperation. So they don't know the highs. They don't know the lows. They're just kind of right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
And dude, that's not you. You like burned bright and you did something truly extraordinary.
I've been down in the troughs too, man.
Yeah. It's kind of goes with it, right? A normal person wouldn't do that. Like if you were just like, you take the safe 9 to 5.
I know, but think of all the different experiences that I've had, man. And like, it's so much more enriching to learn about so many different things in life and experience so many different places. It's like it's what keeps me going to kind of just really experience the full life.
You've lived like 10 lives already compared to normal, whatever normal is. But I think it's amazing.
Man, it was just really exciting to come out here. Thanks for taking me surfing this morning. And if nobody has been out to the Oregon coast to hit the water to surf, it's absolutely beautiful. It's incredible. The water is 49 degrees, but it's otherwise it's amazing out there. Thanks for bringing me, and your property is amazing. So it's been awesome to see where your life has gone, and you're doing some cool stuff too. I'm proud of you.
Well, thanks, man. The day I decided that I wanted to do this podcast, you were like the first person that came to mind.
Thanks,
and,
man.
I just really appreciate you accepting the offer.
Yeah, no problem. If you want to do another one in a year or something, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So that's it. You guys have a good one. We'll see you later.
See ya.